I'm really excited today because we are in London for this Hamilton Hang. And today we're getting a tour of the exhibition of letterpress protest posters, Reverting to Type 2020 at the Standpoint Gallery in London, UK. This is curated by Richard Ardagh and Richard Graham Bignell of New North Press. The exhibition focuses on artworks with something to say. It could be sounding a warning signal about the global climate crisis, railing against fake news and surveillance capitalism, calling out racism, sexism, and fighting for equal opportunities, and of course, reacting to the coronavirus. The show is an international exhibition showcasing progressive letterpress artwork from 100 artists in 17 countries, alongside the work of specially invited collaborators. So Richard and Graham, I want to say thank you so much. I know the show's coming down very quickly or very soon. So thank you for doing this exhibition. And I'm going to hand it over.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to have everyone here for what is sort of the finale of the exhibition, really. The timescales have shifted a few times, but this definitely is the full stop, because from tomorrow onwards we begin to take the work off the walls. Although it will continue in the form of the website, revertingstype.com, which will live on. And it's kind of the way that the majority of people have seen the exhibition, because unfortunately, after only having been open for 2 weeks in December, we had to close because of COVID restrictions and national lockdown in the UK. So yeah, we were going to talk a little bit about where we are and how this came about before taking you on a guided tour of all the artworks. Maybe you want to...
I suppose we, you know, 10 years ago we had Reverting to Type, 2010, was it?
2010?
Yeah. And we thought sort of really it was about time that we had another show. This one, you know, the 2010 show was very much focused on everybody's contribution, but no specific theme. This one, I suppose we were affected by the politics of the time quite a lot earlier in the year. So we thought, you know, it would be a very good subject matter in terms of letterpress posters. So yeah, that was how we arrived at the subject. And then a huge amount of work really from Richard in contacting presses, putting the call out, setting up the website, all that sort of stuff, has sort of made it not as good as the 2010 show, in the sense that we had 2,500 visitors for that show. We probably had about 10, I suppose, overall.
Well, I think it's about
a bit more.
25.
Yeah, so it was physical visitors, but with the online presence, we feel it's been a fantastic way of reaching out to people all over the world. So that's been great. I think we should.
Yeah. So if you bear with us, in from outside the building to give you the full experience. This is genuine London motorbike there. Try not to get run over. So if you were here in person, this is what you would be seeing. It's 6 p.m. in the evening here in London. Quite warm. And this is where we begin. I will try and go slowly so you get a chance to see artworks properly. So, like Graham mentioned, the majority of work in the show came from an open call, which was sent out. We'd actually talked about the idea of protest back in December 2019. And at that time, we sort of had fake news and election results and Brexit and other things in mind, having no idea at all what would be around the corner in 2020. We made the open call announcement in February, which was swiftly followed by the developments through March and onwards. In fact, we did another Hamilton hang to introduce ourselves and our work at the beginning of June. And I think it was the very start of June, and just a few days after the murder of George Floyd. So even at that point, the world was changing a huge amount. And other themes and topics were rushing to the forefront of important things to say. So while the show was originally scheduled to happen in July last year, we postponed it and pushed it back to November, which then became December after more restrictions. We can't really say whether it could have happened in July or not, but all I do know is that we managed to get far more organised in making an Arts Council application here. The Arts Council is a body who fund exhibitions and cultural events, and really our proposal to them was to try and make the exhibition as much as we could COVID-proof. So we were given funding which enabled us to really go to town on the catalogue and build a website as the primary ways of seeing the show if, as eventually did happen, COVID got in the way. So, like we said, the physical exhibition had to shut fairly soon after opening. And at that point, we really shifted focus as much as we could to get the content out there online. The website, as you'll see, is quite similar to the physical exhibition in that there's no hierarchy. The work is just displayed, filling the space and randomly distributed across the screen. I think that was a conscious thing, but a little bit like being here, if you can imagine, it can be quite overwhelming. There's a lot to take in of various sizes and tones of message. I hope no one's offended by bad language. Yeah, so as a reaction to that, we had the idea that we could also post people's work individually on Instagram and Facebook. So as well as the website, we tried to post between 2 and 5 posters per day on those channels to really give people a chance to concentrate on work individually and to give the artists sort of the spotlight and a bit of due credit, really. So, you know, people seem to appreciate that trickling current of information, and it was just another way of beginning conversations, really. I think we're not necessarily the most technically savvy press, but excuse me, I'm not really keeping up with all the comments because I'm trying to talk and not drop the iPad.
You're doing great. The only thing I would say is for a second, it felt like you covered up the microphone. Otherwise, you're doing a great job of showing us the work. Thank you.
And as Stephanie said, please do, if I go too fast over something or there's a particular poster you'd like us to revisit after this, make a note of it because we can do that, and very happy to do that. Likewise, I know that there will be artists whose work we're showing who are on the call, and they are very welcome to speak up and join in. We're so happy to bring all these people together. There's so many causes expressed. It's like a snapshot of the times we're living through, really. This Albion printing press is here because one part of the original plan was that during the exhibition being opening, we would have local young people here printing posters, which would be added directly to the wall, which explains that naked area over there. We love the idea that their messages were as important as anything else, and that the show could be growing while it was on. So it's very sad that this has been quite a silent corner.
Extinction Rebellion, we're going to do a workshop as well, so it's been quite a lively atmosphere, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that brings me on to talking about the collaborations. So everything you've seen so far were submitted posters, but the ones in this corner were collaborations that were printed here at New North Press. They are spread out, obviously, but there are various different groups involved here. There are adults with learning disabilities, and artists, graphic designers, local school leavers who had their exam results downgraded, fashion designers and environmental campaigners, sculptors, stand-up comedian, a Senegalese asylum seeker who has to remain nameless because of his asylum application, which the government seems to be being very hostile towards anyone who speaks out or causes trouble, which is sad. But yeah, these are just like the 2010 exhibition. We wanted to invite other voices to be part of the show. It was our way of keeping things diverse, making sure we were expressing a real range of voices, and that a variety of topics were being covered. And while you may think that COVID stopped everything last year, we actually managed to print 26 different collaborations in the end. Several
30 odd of each poster.
Yeah, they're in editions of 25 or 30, 25. And some of the artists did manage to come here to print the work, which was great. Obviously, all the way through, we've had to be very careful with making sure people sanitize and are safe, but it's a real privilege to have people with a clear vision and a message to come in and work with us. I think we certainly thrive off that kind of working, and it's just great to involve different people. I am now going to just do this corner, which is more submitted work without falling over the press. Maybe I should go closer.
While you're showing, we have a question. John wants to know how you put the work up. How are they mounted on the wall?
Well, as you can see in the corner, we have magnets. Because we wanted quite a non-hierarchical layout, we decided that a great way to mount the work would just be to put screws into the wall and put a magnet on the screw head, and then attach the work on top of it with another magnet. So it means that things could go up quickly, and that we can also straighten and adjust them as needed. It definitely wouldn't have been the kind of show that we would have framed things from a practical or financial or topical point of view. But the magnet approach meant that we could really go to town with sort of layering the posters, so it felt much more like a rally or a mass protest. Yeah, I was going to say teenager's bedroom there, but that doesn't sound right, does it?
Thank you, Richard. That was great. You had also mentioned, and I've shared the link a couple of times, that some of these pieces are available. I'll reshare that link again. Do you want to talk about that for a second?
So it is a commercial show in that the work is for sale. I think the primary objective from our point of view and a lot of the artists isn't necessarily to generate an income from the work, but it needed to cover costs and also for people's time and talent. So the work is available to buy. The collaborations that I just showed, because we editioned them, we have the editions for sale on the New North Press website. The rest of the work is by inquiry. You'll see a button at the bottom of each person's poster on the Reverting to Type website. That's because some of the work we have in limited quantities. A few of the prints are proofs which aren't for sale, but they're all open to inquiry that way. There's a good mixture of the humorous as well as the serious, which I like. And obviously different languages. It's an international show, so it's great to have messages which will speak more immediately to other cultures. Let's go close for this one. We're lucky to have this atrium area of the exhibition space, which goes right up to a skylight at the top. And this was our sort of, not spillover space, but our emergency space that if we had misjudged and had too many works, we could have gone up these other walls. But we didn't do that in the end, or at least that one is our highest one up there.
Would you guys like to talk about that one piece? I think it sometimes gets a little bit lost. The consequences piece?
Yeah, this one's by Rick Griffith. I would prefer it if he was the one talking about it, in case I misinterpret it, but it's obviously something that could be displayed in a shop window or a house or just about anywhere, which makes people realize that they've got to be responsible, and that even in everyday environments, that people have to be held responsible for their comments and behavior.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Well done. The magic word on that is consequences. Yeah. Mostly because, you know, what's been happening for the last hundreds of years is that the responsibility for creating consequences for racist behavior has been like left to black people to create. And honestly, I think it's just about time that like white people take that responsibility, and that, you know, it's a shift in the idea of who can hold that level of responsibility for that behavior, and that like white people have as much at stake if they want to have safe spaces as black people do. So this is a tool or an instrument that could be used for that purpose.
Yeah, I mean, it has the great power of all good signage, doesn't it? You feel completely, you know, it makes sense, and it's a rule that you don't disobey. It shouldn't, in some ways, I wanted to say that you shouldn't have to have this sign, which isn't to undermine your artwork, Rick, but it sort of makes me sad that you have to tell people this.
Right. Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Rick, for sharing.
I didn't recognize your voice then, and I can't see it on my screen, so I'm glad it was you.
Cheers.
I mean, for us, it's also such a nice thing to feel like we've done something to bring people together. You know, we live in a very connected world in a virtual sense. You can turn on your phone and whatever and see people's work who you really admire and pursuing amazing causes. There are many houses within the Letterpress church, but to sort of do something that galvanizes people and brings them together under a simple title that gives people the lenience to take it where they want to and make some really powerful work is great. And I hope that it sort of has a legacy that goes beyond the show that people didn't see, you know.
How did you find the difference between 10 years on from the last exhibition in terms of the uptake of submissions and letterpress as a technique? Yeah, how have you seen a development in that?
I think for that period of time, I mean, when we put that show on, we only knew really 20 presses. So it was a very limited call out. And then when we started collating all the presses that we've since got to know through Letterpress Workers and all those other organisations that do brilliant work about getting letterpress people together, I think obviously the basic process is the same, but what we're seeing is some really interesting developments in using letterpress, the way it's printed, and people are cutting new letters, that sort of thing. So, I mean, it's grown massively over that period, I think. And great, you know, I mean, if you look on Instagram and places like that, there are so many posters being produced. So this is a really sort of small proportion of what people are doing.
I think it's a technique that can very easily be linked and shackled to the past. but in doing a show like this, it ceases to become about the technique, and it just becomes about the message and the content, which makes it relevant. You know, if you only make work which looks old, it will always be looking backwards. But if you make work which confronts people and is about current themes, then it begins to look forward and turn into something else. And there's so much, there's so many good messages and so much talent in the way that they're portrayed. It just makes for a lovely mixture and diverse show, really.
And I know we have more artists on the call, which is really exciting as well. Does anyone who is an artist in the exhibition care to raise their hand? It's a nice way for me to kind of see who's joined us that's also on display here. We've got Annabelle Larner, we've got Michael from Clawhammer Press, Mary Plunkett, Marit Frandisness,
I mean, there will be a lot of thank yous from us at the end, but one which I'll just say now on that topic is thank you to everyone involved so much for doing their bit in promoting the show. It's a lovely thing to know that it reached far beyond our own audience and wide out there in everyone's individual circles and countries and beyond, hopefully. It will have started conversations and reinforced messages for people, and it's something to be proud of, so thank you. Yeah, I'm going to talk more about this poster in a minute. And yeah.
I've got to say thank you for including my work in the exhibition, because it's not text-based. And I remember sending you a slightly kind of nervous email before submitting, Richard, saying, well, it is letterpress and it is on paper, so it's a poster and it is about protest. You don't need to say you'll definitely include it, but what do you reckon? And you said, yeah, we should probably submit it. So thank you so much for allowing that in.
Well, I know that the important thing was the subject, and I think what we tried to do was include things with a strong message. I'm going to try and find your work again in a minute. I feel obliged to carry on showing other people's, but essentially what I think I replied was what made it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I hope there's no one watching whose work we did have to turn away, who feels angry about it. But in general, we took anything that had a strong message and was printed letterpress. The open interpretation of the protest theme was fairly wide. And I think makes for a very good show, if I do say so myself.
We made something, tried our best.
Yeah, I think we can certainly say that. We tried our best. And it's been a great way of finding out about and meeting more and more presses. Coming on to the last wall. There we go.
Must be tired.
Yeah, that might have worked out for the day, I think. Thanks for bearing with us.
Well, we've never had that quiet of a ham hang for that long. And I looked and everyone was just quietly watching and looking at all the work. So thank you so much for, I know we'll say thank you again. Yes, they're all still here. That was wonderful. And I will let you continue. And then if people have questions, they can ask those. So it's a good way for us to do that and also maybe introduce any of the artists. So anyway, if you want to continue, I know you had a couple other thoughts.
Well, I was just going to show the catalogue. I've got one. Well, I didn't get wrong with that. The catalogue actually comes in two parts, a poster and a booklet with a letterpress printed belly band. But the idea of the poster was that you could walk away from the show with a copy of every artwork. So we have this big map fold version of everything in the show, more or less. And on the back are the details that when everyone submitted their work, full descriptions there. So again, trying to be as democratic as possible and sum everything up. The booklet, I can actually talk about the title now because I know that this is an audience that it might not be lost on. There may be people who know that long primer was actually a pre-pica measurement of type. So before the pica system was introduced, sizes of type had names, and long primer was one of those names, which equated to roughly 10 points, so body text size. But it felt appropriate because we wanted a sort of slim, handsome, tall booklet that would fit with the map fold, and something that essentially was a primer that could be read by someone who didn't know anything about letterpress, or someone whose world was letterpress, and explored themes about the status of letterpress in 2020. When we did our launch broadcast for the show, which is on the exhibition YouTube channel, it can still be watched, Carl Middleton, who worked on this booklet with us, talked in a great way about how it came together. But essentially we have his introduction, which is the context. We have a connections essay, which talks about how all these separate printers getting on with their own things have now been brought together both by letterpress workers and Waze and social media. Then Erin Betloff, who I think is on the call, hi Erin, wrote a great essay on education, the teaching of letterpress, passing on of knowledge, and then we have short interviews with 5 people from around the world who specifically use their work for activism. Ben Blount, Sergei Besov from Russia, Dennis Gould, Mirna Kelleher, and Armina from Belgium. And then I have written something at the end, which is sort of about the prospects for letterpress and where it may be going in the next few years. But this was a sort of an attempt to make something, again, that was a snapshot of the time and that could be referred to afterwards. Not necessarily to be definitive, but to begin and extend conversations about what letterpress is now and what it could be in the future. The other thing I was going to mention was that we had some short films made to promote the exhibition, which were great and made by a really talented filmmaker friend of ours, Alice. What we hadn't anticipated was that the topic of protest would actually fall foul of quite a lot of censorship laws. So when we tried to launch it as an advertising promotion on Facebook for Instagram and Facebook, it kept on getting taken down. And we thought, oh, well, maybe it's because the long version of the film shows protests. So we did a shorter edit, which took out that footage. Then we thought, well, maybe, and then it got taken down again. We thought, well, maybe because it's got swear words in it. So we tried to take out the parts of swear words or political bias, and it still got taken down. So then we took the title protest posters off it, and it still got taken down. So people out there, or algorithms out there, don't like protest, but we tried our best to keep going. And the thing that I mentioned I was going to come back to was that one of the few places where the film did manage to circulate on those paid advertising was South America. And in Argentina and Brazil, one of the versions of the video showed. But what we hadn't anticipated was that the first poster you saw was by an Argentinian artist, and it said, "Violence is eating animals," in Spanish. And we had an immense backlash to it, not taking into account what the video was for, but purely this poster. And there were hundreds and hundreds of comments posted by angry meat eaters with a bloodlust, basically showing pictures of barbecues and saying that they should put vegetarians on the barbecue and eat them and stuff like that. So the topic of protest has been a slightly difficult one to navigate, in fact. I'm wary of taking down comments because I think there needs to be healthy debate and that hopefully people will confront them, but then you don't want to be in a situation where you appear to be condoning it. In fact, today there was someone who posted on some of the Instagram posters things that I wasn't terribly happy with, but perhaps the artist will respond to the comments, or perhaps I'll look at them again in a few days and decide that they're inappropriate to take them down. But it's an interesting quagmire to be in, actually.
Unexpected,
Yeah.
really.
And sorry, I was just going to come back. This was Theo's poster that he asked the question before. Obviously not typographic, but it was printed letterpress. And I don't know whether you can read the title, Sending Smoke Signals, but it's a rendering of the riots in Bristol. Was it Theo? Sorry, I can't remember.
No, it was just, it was based on tear gassing of protesters in America, actually. But to be honest, it was just, I was in lockdown. All I was seeing was like violence and kind of smoke, and whether that was tear gas or flares from protesters or whatever it was. So it's kind of what started the work. So I think the image was based on tear gas, kind of around a flare. So the flare in the middle was like a yellow, and then the kind of green, blue, grey is the smoke of tear gas. So that's where it came from, and then kind of led into
M space quads, is it?
24-point borders cast by Carpathian type foundry Andrew. So yeah, just locked up, and then each colour, well, people will know, but yeah, locked up, and then each colour registered and then printed and then swapped around.
I mean, we thought it was a really strong piece and definitely something that should be part of the show. It's you can't necessarily define letterpress by the boundaries of it has to be printed from wood or metal type anymore. Some of the most interesting work I keep seeing is printed from torn MDF or polymer or whatever. I think with a show like this, it has to be about the message primarily. So thank you for it. Yeah.
No, thank you. That means a lot. Thank you.
It's interesting, in fact, that the lockdown has given people time to focus on these other issues. Perhaps we're all so wrapped up in our daily lives that we get carried away, and it's easy to ignore the homeless person asking for your change as you come out of the supermarket, or the horrible comment that you overhear on the bus or whatever. But I think it's a turbulent time, but it's great that people were able to have that time, hopefully, to make some important work that, you know, in terms of climate change and all these huge issues we're wrestling with, went towards expressing that.
And actually, really, the protest posters carry on. So, you know, it should carry on after this show. More work should be produced, and hopefully there'll be another exhibition of protest posters somewhere else. So.
Yeah.
There was a question about that because people were interested in getting their hands on the catalog. Is the catalog still available for sale?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we've still got catalogues. Yeah, they're available on the New North Press website. I don't think they appear on the Reverting to Type 1, but if you visit the New North Press page, they're on there. Yeah.
Great. I'll make sure to share that. Thank you.
And we have sent one to everyone in the show. I very much hope that everyone has got them, but if there's anyone watching who hasn't got theirs, then do let us know and we'll make sure it comes your way.
Great. So we have just a little bit. Oh, there's the link to the catalog. And I was going to say, I have one question that someone asked. Otherwise, if anybody has questions, they can speak up or raise their hand. John wanted to know, can you say any more about the Spain is different poster? Is that isotype?
That's a good question. I could look up on the catalogue and tell you. I'll find out which one it is.
We go around to it. Right.
Well, it's by Jesus, who's a friend of ours in Spain, also known as bunker type. I'll read you his description first. I'm not sure if it's going to answer the question specifically. At the end of the 1930s, the artist and designer Gerd Ants joined the team of Otto Neurath, director of the Society and Economy Museum of Vienna, in a project that ended in 1934 with the creation of Isotype in The Hague. The project was about the graphic system in which the world could be described throughout synthetic images representing different fields ranging from industry or demography to politics or economics. Almost a century later, in the project Spain is Different, participates not only in the language of Ants, but also in its critical spirit, portraying a Spanish society resigned and submissive to the inequalities and abuses of the elites and their leaders, showing a system in which these wealthy classes are perpetuated, while these differences between the first and second class citizens are magnified. So they are isotypes in terms of being from the graphic term isotype. I assume that they were cut as blocks. I don't think Jesus is on the call to answer that.
Well, thank you. That was the one we had a question about, so I appreciate that. And I put the link there in the chat for anyone who wants to look specifically more at it. Did anybody else have any other questions? I know we have some of the artists on the call. So if you have any specific questions for Clawhammer Press or Hannah Biles or Jen Farrell or Matt Tilby, we even have Mary Plunkett, Andrew Long, Ben Blount, and Frank Baseman and Theo Miller. I know you are on the call. I may have called some of you out that didn't raise your hand. John, did you have a question? You can please speak up. You'll have to unmute.
I'm just registering that I'm on call.
Oh, thank you. Okay, and Pixel Press also spoke up.
Hi guys. Well, we could just say some big thank yous. We're very grateful to Standpoint Gallery, which is the gallery space of the building that New North Press is in upstairs, for letting us use the space. We wanted to thank Christian and Daniel for building the website. We wanted to thank Alice for making the films and taking the photographs. We wanted to thank the Arts Council for really making this as good as we were able to make it. Without that funding, it may have been a bit of a shadow of this show, but left us in a huge financial hole at least. Thank you very much to all our collaborators, including Carl and everyone who contributed to the catalogue, all of the artists who we printed work with, whether it was a submitted idea or they came and worked here with us. And thank you, Graham.
Thank you, Richard.
I hope I haven't left anyone out. Thank you, Stephanie and Hamilton, for inviting us to do this. It feels like a very nice way to close the show. Yeah.
Well, I think a big round of applause is due to you guys. Thank you so much for sharing so much amazing work. Yeah, thank you. It's so wonderful to see everyone from around the world that have joined us. I know we've got some people very early in Australia on the call. I know we've got people in the US and across the world. So thank you everybody for joining us today.